Hi, Mrs. Bradshaw here, and this is Business Law. We're going to be learning about mistake, misrepresentation, and fraud in this section. So we're going to start out with a little case study. Jane contracts with Mike to purchase one of his two skateboards. Jane thinks that she has bought the red one, which is a premier skateboard. Mike thinks Jane has bought the blue one, which has less value. Does a contract exist? So we know that this is a mutual mistake. Two people have made a mistake. Both parties have an incorrect belief about an important fact. An important fact is what we call a material fact. So the answer is no. There is a mutual mistake of fact about the identity of the subject matter, and that is one of the instances when you can cancel a contract. Another example of a mutual mistake would be if you think you are buying a Picasso painting valued at $350,000 and the seller thinks that they are selling an Adamson valued at $35. So this is also a mutual mistake. However, this one is a mistake as to the value of the subject matter, and the law says that the contract is still valid and enforceable. So although it's a mutual mistake, because it's for the value, it is valid and enforceable. All right, now we're going to look at the two different types of mistakes. Unilateral mistake is a mistake by one person. A mutual mistake is a mistake by two parties. So you read and you signed a contract, but you did not understand it. That would be a unilateral mistake as to the fact. So maybe you didn't speak the language very well and you didn't quite understand all of the aspects. This would still be a valid contract and it would still be enforceable. Otherwise, we could always just say we didn't understand a part to try to avoid our contracts. A mutual mistake as to the fact would be maybe both parties believe that they are contracting for 41 acres of land when it's actually only 28 acres. This is not binding and it's unenforceable, so they can get out of that contract if they like. We also have mistakes as to the law. So a unilateral mistake as to the law might be Bugliosi spent all of the money he had on a $40,000 car. He did not know that he would still have to pay $3,600 in sales tax. That's a law that you have to pay sales tax. He thought that that was already included in the contract. This is valid and binding and still enforceable. So it was a unilateral mistake. He should have done his research and known what he was getting into before he made that kind of an agreement. A mutual mistake as to the law would be both parties contract for land that they believe that zoning laws allow for the construction of a White Castle. The law does not allow for this type of building. This is valid, but the White Castles could not be constructed. So it's still an enforceable contract, but they could not build the White Castle that they wanted. Now let's see what you understand about misrepresentation. There are three elements you have to prove in order to prove misrepresentation occurred. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply these three elements to this case. The Food Lion grocery store had been washing spoiled meat in bleach and then selling it to the customers like it was brand new. They would put dates on the meal that said it was still good to eat, even though normally it would have expired by now. The customers bought the meat thinking it was good and then got sick. Identify the three elements of misrepresentation in this case. First, you have to identify what was the untrue statement of fact, or was there any active concealment, meaning they didn't outright lie, but they withheld important information. The statement is material, which means it's important to the transaction, and the victim reasonably relied upon the statement. To prove misrepresentation, it has to be an untrue statement of fact. So to know the difference between a fact and an opinion, I want you to go through here and change the opinions to facts. So for example, this car will suit your needs well for at least the next year. You might make that more factual. We don't really know what their needs are, so maybe you could say the transmission will run perfectly for the next 12 months. That's a factual statement. So change the opinions to facts. You have to prove that the statement is about something material, which means important. I want you on your note sheet to identify which statements are material. We have the car has 30,000 miles on it, the signature belongs to Babe Ruth, and this car was driven by a famous actor, which isn't true. It was just driven by a regular person. You want to sell your bike. List 2 things that could be considered material facts in regards to your bike. So on your note sheet, add those 2 things that you think are material, meaning important. And we also have to prove that it was reasonably relied upon to prove misrepresentation. So Mr. Johnson told someone that his car was a 1964 model instead of a 65. 64 models were worth far more money. The man later found out that the car was a 65, but he wanted to buy it anyways. Did he reasonably rely upon the misrepresentation of Mr. Johnson? No, because he knew about it and he still bought the car. When we get to fraud, you just add 2 additional elements to the misrepresentation: that the statement was made intentionally and that injury resulted. So I'd like you to practice proving these elements. Some of the remedies for fraud are that you can cancel the contract, that's known as rescission, so you can get your money back or the subject matter back, or you can sue for damages. Punitive, which means you're punishing the person, or compensatory, is they're just trying to compensate you. So you're going to go through these different cases and try to prove these 5 elements. And again, it's the same elements as misrepresentation with 2 additional ones: intentionally made, injury resulted. And that doesn't have to be physical injury. And now on your own, I'd like you to practice the elements of fraud using the sheet that is linked on my website.